Welcome to Pilates World Book Club. This book club was started by myself and Claire Sparrow, who is unable to join us today. She's very busy touring with her own book. She has a book called Hope for Your Pelvic Floor, 6 Practical Principles to Restore Your Pelvic Health and Reclaim Your Life. So that's a wonderful book as well. And when we started this book club together, she was not an author. She had no intention of becoming an author. And then it magically happened and manifested. So she says there's a book in all of us. So maybe as we go through today's book club, you might be sparked to be thinking about, yeah, I have, wonderful things in my mind, body, and spirit that you might want to get out there. Yeah. So that said, one of the other miraculous manifestations was me meeting Nanci. So I met our author today, Nanci, also through the Pilates world when I was at the Pilates on tour in Monterey, California for the Advanced Movement Principles for the Lower Back, which was created and led by Nora St. John, our mentor. Nanci and I were both trained by Nora at her studio in Walnut Creek. And so we've been living similar parallel lives. And I ended up being one of the facilitators in a group that Nanci was in. And I learned just as much or maybe more from Nanci than she may have from me. And then we ended up having lunch one day together. And in conversation, we found that we both are just so passionate about this idea of being perfectly imperfect. And I had mentioned how I really love Brene Brown's work and that I identify as a recovering perfectionist as well and come from a long line of them. And then Nanci was so eloquent in her speech. There was so much richness that she had to offer. I said, "Gosh, Nanci, you should write a book." She had this sparkle in her eye and she said, well, I don't know if she said, I already have or I already did, or she was like in the process, of writing the book. And so I'm so glad that now it is out, it's published, and you can grab a copy. If you don't have one already, you can get it on Amazon. Um, so with that said, I love to write in my books. I can't tell you how many flagged pages are in here, how many notes are in here, underlined and highlighted and all of this. So there's just so much rich content in here. If you haven't read the book, I hope that you're inspired to pick up a copy today and to dive in. So here's one line. I believe in the possibilities of the body. That's exactly what I believe as well. So when my clients and students are walking into the classroom, into the studio, I often believe more for them than they believe in themselves. And I help to try to guide them into believing the possibilities that are within their body as well. Be gentle with your body. It wants to please you. There's um, there's something that my mother actually shared with me in her birthing process. I think she said something about like, there might be just one place in your body that feels good. I think it was there was this thumb exercise that she shared with me of like having a focal point, like just focusing on that one spot. Like maybe that one spot just feels good, or maybe it's just your big toe, you know? And so if someone comes in and they're recovering, maybe they've been, they've graduated from physical therapy and then they're coming into Pilates because their PT said, Pilates would be a good next step for you, right? But they might be still feeling some discomfort. Um, Trying to guide them into what feels good in the body. And there's so many just, yeah, beautiful stories in here that Nanci shares with us on how she helps guide people in those directions as well. And then let's see, one more. She says, we begin where you are now. And I have this very special client who has a pillow that says something very similar. And she's of a very similar spirit to me as well. And, we get stuck sometimes in that perfect thinking, that perfectionism of, I need to start on a Monday, or I need to wait until, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day to, start this intention or to do this thing, right? But this pillow says begin anywhere. So, beginning anywhere. Now I'm going to pass it along over to you, Nanci.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was absolutely beautiful. And I am delighted to get to be here today and to share with you a little bit more about me, answer any questions, do a guided meditation exercise that I found to be tremendously helpful, and visualization as well. And to really just hold this space together and to, again, believe in the possibilities of the body and the mind and the spirit too. So, who am I? I am Nanci Reed, and I am a Pilates instructor, a self-worth coach, an author, a spiritual teacher, and a quantum manifestation specialist. And I'll get into that a little more too. But I support heart-centered, sensitive, successful women to value themselves at the level of their biggest dream, not their doubts, even before their dream fully comes true, without the paralysis of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, self-judgment, or comparisons, by using deliberate kindness and curiosity as the cornerstones to invite total transformation and manifestation of abundance on every level. And so within that, it applies to when I'm working with individual Pilates clients or in small groups, or if I am working with a coaching client or in small groups as well. And so overall, the underlying intention that I bring into any sort of interaction that I have with a client, regardless of what the modality of healing is that we're focusing on, is that I nurture and hopefully inspire perfectly imperfect, active decision makers and life participants who believe in the reality of their dreams. And these don't have to be those like big, scary dreams, but they can be, right? They can be the dream of being able to move their finger without pain, like one of my clients that I mentioned in my book, too, right? So it's all about meeting yourself where you are now and recognizing that now is always the perfectly imperfect time to begin living your own version of happily ever now. And let's face it, we've all grown up with stories about happily ever after. That if we wait for the after in life, so after other people give us permission, after we take care of all the things on the checklist that was created by something outside of us, then we can start feeling better. Then we can start living a more aligned life with the truth of us. And whether that be in the form of moving our body freely or moving our mind freely and emotionally, right? Or spiritually, or all three together, it doesn't matter. It's just about what speaks to your heart and where you are, right? And so I'm hoping that after our time today together, that you will again be able to hear your inner voice speak softly to you, but with certainty and clarity. And that softness is actually a superpower. And so if you're wanting to move your body differently, if you're wanting to have your clients move their bodies differently, there is a way to approach things. Once you take perfectionism off the table, then that opens up everything else as being available to you. And so within that, I also want to remind you that if it's possible for me, just like Sarah was saying, a lifelong card-carrying perfectionist, to gently overcome this mindset and to instead invite a different replacement that is softer, more judgmental, more gentle and less judgmental, then it's possible for you too. So regardless of where you are in your life, where you see yourself going, it is possible to choose now as that perfectly imperfect time. And that there's no hurry or urgency to any of this, Because at the same time that you are experiencing these changes or these transformations within your mind, body, or spirit, there's also this part of you, that higher version of you, that has already experienced this. And that's where that idea of quantum manifestation comes in as well. And so you can apply this into any aspect or area of your life, wherever you are, always choosing your now as the now to begin. And Sarah, do you have any questions about that?
Well, I guess I do. I don't and I do. That was something that I had written down the other day when we had this great conversation about quantum manifestation. I was thinking, have you ever created like your elevator pitch and maybe that was just it, or a definition? I feel like that could be in the dictionary. Is that a definition that's already out there? Is that something you coined? I hadn't heard that before, and then it really drew me in.
No, it's actually not just mine. It's definitely out there, especially in the self-help, personal growth, personal development space, and particularly within the spiritual lens within that as well. But what it really means is that you can begin valuing yourself at the level of your biggest dream, your biggest accomplishment, right? Versus your doubt right now, because there's a part of you that knows that even those things appear to be just manifesting right now, they've also already manifested, because quantum also means that time is not linear, right? And so quantum physics, that's what it talks about. It talks about when you look up in the night sky at night, that you're actually looking into the past, right? Because the light that you're seeing above you that seems to be right now visible to you was actually sent many, many, many light years or millions of years prior from the origination and the source of that. So physicists, now they've embraced this idea of quantum mechanics and quantum physics. So quantum manifestation is aligning with that idea that even though we experience time as being linear, and we have lots of reminders of that in our own lives. We have children that all of a sudden become older, and then adults, as including ourselves. We have little lines on our faces that show up every single day a little bit more as we get older. So there's all these things that reinforce that. And yet from an energetic standpoint, which is where quantum really lives in its like existence, right? Then what we're doing is we're tapping into that part of us that is able to both have something be experienced as it's happening right now, and at the same time accessing something that feels like a memory. So I know within me and my Pilates practice that there was a part of me when I began that was like, oh my gosh, I'm this brand new instructor. I don't even, I'm not going to remember anything. I'm going to have notes. And how am I possibly going to remember clients, right? And then there was this other part of me that I can't even describe any differently than when I just said that it was like a memory that was like, hey, you're good. You got this. Everything works out. Like, you help a lot of people and you help yourself, but you need to trust yourself. And yes, you're still going to be learning. Yes, you're still going to be making decisions. You're going to be choosing mentors. You're going to be taking classes. You're going to be doing all of these things. But at the same time, recognize that if there is a purposeful dream in your heart, whether it's to have a successful Pilates practice, write a book someday, have a family, start your own business, or just to move your finger without pain, that there is a part of you that has experienced the other side of that. And so that's what you're drawing into and tapping into, even though it doesn't feel like it's actually come true in this moment. And so there's that part of you that is experiencing the manifestation energy now, even if the world says, wait a minute, that hasn't happened quite yet. So it's not denial, but it's an expansion and a connection to something that feels bigger than just you. And it's that part of you that is the true you, that inner voice within you, like I mentioned in the book. Does that help clarify things?
It does for sure. It also sparks me to be remembering about a portion of the book when you're talking about how and maybe you can paraphrase it, or you can probably go right there into the book and read this little section to us about not putting on rose-colored glasses, rose-colored lenses, right? But
Yeah.
it was something about that. So maybe you can find that or paraphrase that in a moment. And then also I was just ruminating on at the beginning of your explanation of, looking out at the stars, right? And that idea that like time exists always now, like the past, the present, the future, um,
Hmm.
and that our lens of what we're seeing, like the prism, we can shine it in different ways and focus in at different angles and look through different belief systems and whatnot. And that as Pilates instructors, reining it back into, how we uh, teach when students are coming in, or the way that I teach, and you teach, um, I feel is similar in that we know when the student is walking in the door, one of our goals is often, if not always, to help like open up their vision to trying on those different lenses, right? And
Hmm.
trying to get them to release their self-limiting beliefs, right? So that they can see the beauty or the potential that is there, that we already know is there for them. So going back to the rose-colored glasses, can you paraphrase that or share with our audience a little bit about that
Yes,
section?
100%. And that actually comes on page 99 in my book. And it was really important to me when I was working on the book Happily Ever Now with my editor that we include a portion on the importance of not, yes, there you go, see, of not going into a space of denial as you're looking at the things that you're wanting to transform in your life, right? So there's this like practice that seems to happen, I'm sure, from the very best of intentions, but especially within spiritual work or spiritually minded work, is that there's sort of this idea that all you have to do is to sort of bliss out, that you just get to go, oh, I'm only going to think happy thoughts now. And I'm only going to think positive things. And now my life is going to be totally different. And I'm just going to, if my body doesn't feel well today, I'm going to say, oh, that's not positive. So I'm just going to deny that and ignore it. And then what happens is that we tell ourselves then, as we're like coughing up a lung, right? Because we haven't listened to our body speaking to us in the only language it knows how, which is either pain or pleasure, right? Because they're both the same. And so we then instead, when we're denying it, we're actually making the problem bigger. And we're only going to deny something if we're afraid of it. So the section that you're referring to is found on page 99, and it's under the chapter called Dreams and Nightmares Are Both Unreal. And the inspiration for this came from my little girl having terrible nightmares for a period of her life. And that there was a temptation as a mother, right? And maybe some of you can relate to this, that as a mother, I wanted to take away the fear. I wanted to take away the frightened look in her face, basically, too. And so the normal response that we do as parents, again, with the very best of intentions, is we say, oh, but nightmares aren't real, right? Nightmares aren't real. You're safe. Everything's fine. And then we kind of like just, that's it. We're done. Like we tell kids that, okay, now just move on. Well, what we're doing though is we're actually feeding their fear by doing that. Because it's almost like that if your child keeps telling you that there is a monster in the closet, right? And we all have our monsters in the closet in our lives. So, but if our little child is telling us that there's a monster in the closet, again, as a parent, especially if we're tired or overworked or overwhelmed, or if we're trying to be perfect, right? We might just go, oh, but monsters aren't real. And then the little kid's like, wait a minute. What? But mom, you didn't even look in the closet. How do you know that monsters aren't real? Versus instead, if we take their hand gently and we say, my darling child, come with me here together. Let's go open that closet door. And I'm going to turn the light on in the room so you can see there's no monster here. Now the child goes, oh, okay, I trust mom. And look, there isn't anything to be afraid of in that closet. So now I can look too with that light. And oh, yeah, there's nothing there, right? So when we keep denying something, we actually keep feeding the fear of it and we make it larger and larger and larger. Whereas instead, when we come with kindness, gentleness, and curiosity, not preconceived judgment, there isn't anything we can't look at. And it doesn't mean it'll necessarily go poof and disappear or get better, but it does mean that now we are empowered from a decision-making place in our minds. And so, no, we can't control what seems to be happening outside of us, but we have sole control over our interpretation of what is happening within us.
Thank you. With that, can we hear a little bit from your book, an excerpt?
Yes, absolutely. So let me just pull this up for you. And there we go. All right. So I wanted to share, particularly with this audience, some testimonials from my experience as a Pilates instructor, as well as those that I share within the book as well. And so one of these stories that really still just, oh my gosh, I get tears just thinking about it because there's just so much wisdom in the looking back upon the real purpose of this experience is with my client, Beth. And so I'm going to just read here, starting on page 139, about Beth's story. And then I might share another story as well, just depending on how the time is too. But Beth's story. So about 18 months after moving to Los Angeles, running my busy Pilates business took up most of my focus. My circle of referrals was growing, and I was becoming known as that, quote, kind and curious girl who dialogues with your body somehow so that you feel better and have more energy when you leave your session than when you did when you arrived. Each morning before I teach, I wake up with a single intention and prayer. God, help me to check my own ego at the door and to be fully present and focused for my clients. Let me be kind above all else, no matter what form my kindness takes. Guide my hands and voice to know what's true, and let me be an instrument for love and its highest expression in all that I am and do. Amen. The core question that I ask anyone who wants to work with me is, what sort of transformation are you most hoping to experience? Usually the responses include phrases like better romantic relationships, to fit into an old pair of jeans, to learn how to meditate, to get rid of pain, to become more flexible, and so on. Never once in my 2 decades of sharing this work has a client ever said to become your favorite student until Beth showed up for her session at my studio. Right away, I noticed that she had poor posture and an imbalanced gait. She favored her right knee and seemed to use her back for any sort of exertion rather than her core muscles. While there was no denying that her clothes and hairstyle exuded a grandmotherly vibe, I soon came to realize that Beth's razor-sharp wit and fiery spunk would best anyone half her chronological age. I was still stunned by her answer to my question, so I repeated her words with care, allowing her to correct me in case I'd misheard. Yes, that's what I said, to become your favorite student, Beth said. I could care less about being good at any of this stuff, but as long as you tell me with sincerity that I'm your favorite student, I will show up 3 times a week and I'll always pay you in advance. But if I sense you're not sincere, I will quit that day. And you can keep any leftover money that I've paid you and never see me again. I thought back to my graduate studies in psychology and deliberately chose a question that I hoped would bring out more of her understanding and underlying motivation. What's the significance of you being my favorite student? I asked. At my age, people your age tend to either dote on us out of duty or guilt. I'm challenging you to see beyond my gray hair and to teach me as though I'm your favorite and best student. I'm not dead yet, so treat me as though I have my whole life ahead of me rather than in the rearview mirror. For these 3 sessions a week with you, I want to feel seen and known rather than discarded. Can you do that? I read about you and your kindness project online, and I knew that you were the teacher I'd been seeking. At that moment, I recalled one of my mentor's lessons about kindness. It meets you wherever you are, whenever you're ready to recognize its presence. Beth was a literal manifestation of my daily intention and prayer. She wasn't just any student. She'd instantly become my favorite by teaching me once again to trust the timing of my life and to let kindness and curiosity lead rather than preconceived judgment and fear. There are no accidents. Beth's candor prompted me to look at my own preconceived judgments about my first impressions and assessment of her potential and of all of my clients in general. Never again would I discount someone's future possibilities by what their body looked like at first glance. I realized that I still hadn't officially responded to her last question, so I answered, yes, Beth, I can do what you're asking for as long as you find our sessions to be helpful. Thank you for teaching me to remember what's really important as a teacher, meeting your students where they believe they are in the present, without any preconceived notions about their past or future. Wonderful, Beth said. Let's get started. Your favorite student is ready to begin her lessons. True to her promise, Beth showed up for private Pilates sessions with me 3 times a week for nearly 5 years. Her balance, joint stability, and core strength improved so dramatically that after 1 year of working together, lifting her granddaughter, a previously daunting task, soon felt effortless instead of the past painful struggle. She became a dear friend and mother figure to me. Beth taught me how to look beyond the number of trips someone has made around the sun and allow their timeless essence to shape their process as a Pilates student instead. I'm grateful for our relationship and timeless connection.
So beautiful.
Thank
There's
you.
so much wisdom, right? We can glean from one another if we only just, yeah, pause and soften and listen. And when I was speaking to Nancy and as I was brainstorming myself too, how to dive into this book club today and what aspects of the book to highlight, is really difficult because the first section of the book, maybe 75% of the book, is Nancy's story, which I absolutely love as the precursor to hearing these other stories, because once you know someone better, right? Like she shares a lot with us about some various big events in her life that has in a way molded, who she is, or how she interacts with the world. Not, she is who she is always. Um, and And I think that it really helps us when we know all of that about Nancy, um, again, to learn how to shed our preconceived ideas about someone, which is something I'm always striving to do. You know, we all have our initial reactions or, thoughts and judgments when, we meet someone for the first time. I like don't judge a book by its cover. Um, and yet we still have all of our own experience from all of our years of life that shapes our lenses. And then when someone new comes into our life, we have that, those automatic assumptions. And then, however, we can get closer to acknowledging that, seeing that for what it is, understanding why we thought those thoughts in the beginning, but more quickly shift to being open to really getting to know that person as the individual beyond whatever our individual judgments and lenses are telling us might be true. And so my when I first picked up the book, I read maybe half of the first 75%, whatever that calculation is. And then I jumped to the back of the book because I wanted to get to the Pilates stories. And I read a couple of the Pilates stories, and then I came back to the book later and then read the whole introduction and then read all of the stories. And um, we can each approach the book in any way that it's going to work for us, and that's the way that it worked for me at the time. But I really absorbed the stories better having known Nancy and understanding her lens before diving into these stories. They were so much more rich. There was so much more context and history, you know, um, with me and Nancy, even if I didn't know if I hadn't met Nancy in person, you develop this relationship, with her in the book and understanding her. And so, yeah, so I'm excited to open it up for some Q&A. I have some questions as well to throw out there. And then um, gosh, there's so many more stories too. If you haven't read them, I want you to read them. But time-wise, I want to make sure that we also stay on task. So we'll see. Maybe if you all have a little more time, we might buy a little more time at the end. Okay. But we'll dive into some questions now. So one of the questions that I had for you, Nancy, to share, it's embedded in the book, but just in case you haven't read the book and you need a little extra inspiration to get out there and purchase your copy and dive in, I would love to hear you share with us a little brief description about what drew you into Pilates and becoming an instructor.
Yeah, wow. Well, that's in the book as well. But I will say that what drew me to Pilates was that it was the only thing that helped me to rehabilitate a shoulder injury and a very serious shoulder injury of separating my right AC joint from a very serious car accident too, that I nearly died in. And Pilates was the only thing that after I did it, that I didn't hurt more, right, from working on my body. And I had done physical therapy until my insurance gave out. And then basically I was in this place where I was like, I'm going to have surgery. I just know it. Like, there's no way that my shoulder's just not getting better. It's literally like dangling and all this stuff. But I went to see a surgeon, and he was very unusual in the fact that he was like, you don't need surgery. And I was like, what? You're a surgeon. Are you supposed to just want to cut? And he said, no, 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 no. He said, you remind me of my wife. And she is this ballerina. And he's like, I have a feeling you have this thing called hypermobility syndrome, because most people that would have been in your accident, they would have actually dislocated their shoulder. You only separated your joint. And he said, so therefore, I'm going to have you do a test. And so he had me take my thumb and reach it to my forearm. And he was like, yep, see, hypermobile. And I was like, hypermobile, what is that? And he's like, if I do the surgery, it's just going to stretch back out again. He's like, you need to find something that will get you stronger from the inside out. And you're probably going to have to do it the rest of your life. And I was like, Okay, what? And he's like, I don't know. He said, but there's something out there. And he's like, I know you will find it. And so I was like, okay, sure. Okay. And I went home and I was like asking all these questions. And I was like, basically just so committed that there had to be something out there that could help me. And I was talking to a friend and she was like, I know you tried physical therapy and everything. She's like, have you ever tried this thing called Pilates? And I was like, Pilates? What is that? And she's like, oh, it's this thing, all the celebrities do it in Hollywood. And, I live up in the Bay Area. And so I was like, what? Like, okay, sure, I'll try that. And so I like read a little bit about it on probably one of the early browsers of the day and on the internet. And I like did a search on Yahoo, I think. And like the first studio that came up was like an A listing and it was called Apex Pilates. And that's actually the studio of one of my mentors, Mercy. And so I called and I said, hey, I was in this car accident. I have the shoulder injury, and the shoulder surgeon said I should try to do something that gets me strong from the inside out. Can Pilates do that? And she was like, yep, that's exactly what Pilates does. And so I was like, all right, sign me up. And so I went. And then after doing sessions with her, again, what blew me away was that I didn't have to hurt more to feel better. Like we didn't even really work on my shoulder probably until like a month into sessions. We worked on everything else. She's like, we want to look at all of your body as a whole. I don't just care about your shoulder getting better. I want you to feel better. I want you to move better. I want you to be stronger so that you're able to just navigate your life from a different place. And I was like, yeah, okay, let's do that. So we didn't have to make my shoulder more painful. It wasn't just this, ice e-stim thing that can work for some things, but it wasn't working for my body, especially not with the hypermobility. And after about a month, I realized when I woke up in the morning that I wasn't in pain. And I was like, wow, this thing is really working. And then we started working on my shoulder and on the mechanics of my shoulder and stabilizing my shoulder. But we had already started working on my core and we'd already started building that foundation underneath me. And so after a year of seeing Mercy for 3 times a week, my shoulder was better, like probably about 99%, right? And I was so blown away by it, as was everyone else around me. And I was just like, wow, maybe there's something to this Pilates. And so I started asking my teacher all these questions all the time about things like, well, why are we doing this exercise? And what are we trying to focus on here? And she was like, wow, you have this natural curiosity about the body and you seem to really understand things. Maybe you should be a teacher. And I was like, no, I'm going on for my PhD in psychology. That's my plan. But thank you so much. And, blah, 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 blah. And then, as luck would have it, I went on my honeymoon to South America. And I was there teaching, and I wasn't teaching, but I was at this class, and the teacher had all these students that were asking tons of questions about Pilates. And I started actually answering some of them because I knew more than even the teacher. And the teacher pulled me aside and she was like, hey, how long are you here for? And I said, we're here for like a month because we had this magical like honeymoon. And she said, would you come back and help me? Because I have all these English speaking students and I really could use someone that understands Pilates as well as you do. And I was like, I've only been taking it for a year, but okay. And so then after about, 3 weeks of doing that, I emailed Mercy and I was like, hey, guess what? I'm teaching Pilates and I'm in another country. And so now I'm ready. Where do I go? And that's when she introduced me to Nora. And that's when I began to teach.
I love how it just naturally shifted over to the shoulder because I know someone here today that will really benefit from that particular story. And I have lots of questions, but I also have lots of answers already from Nanci. So I'm thinking I just want to open it up to anyone who might have questions in our audience. Feel free to raise your hand. You can do physical hand or your virtual hand.
I see that there's one from Andy too in the chat.
Oh,
Do you see that?
All right. So, so Nanci, with your clients, do you have them connect to their future self that is already healed? could you say a bit more about working with this future that already exists?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And absolutely, that is exactly what I do. Now, obviously, if I'm just meeting somebody, I'm not going to just start out saying, hey, guess what? There's only the now and da 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 da. I'm obviously going to meet them where they are because that's the definition of kindness to me is meeting somebody where they believe they are. But within that framework, I will begin to speak to them and let them know that their body wants them to feel good. Their body wants them to move freely, that their body is listening to everything that they say in a language that it can understand, which is movement, right? And engagement. And so I will talk to them about that. And I will tell them to look at themselves, like if there's a mirror or something, particularly. And I'll say, look at yourself in the mirror. Do you see the reflection of you? Now, how could your body be reflecting back to you that it's able to do all these things that you don't believe it can right now, right? And then allow them to actually visualize that and to see it. And again, it's not denying anything, it's just holding that space. And it's saying that if you can believe you're worthy of receiving that experience within your body, now it may or may not look like it in exact form, but if when you're moving it, you're coming from a place of kindness and curiosity, then you're at least going to give your body the most space to respond in a way that is helpful and healing to you. And so you're inviting it into the process. And that's always what I tell clients is I let them know that they are not apart from the experience with us doing sessions. They're actually a part of it. And so they're not just some passive bystander that's there. We're wanting to integrate them and how their body is able to respond so that they feel like they have what I call gentle agency, where they're the authority, but not the authoritarian over their experience and how they're moving. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. So I would love to hear a little bit. Well, I would like to know if you have your Pilates clients during sessions and or for homework do journaling, because
Mhm.
I know that was something that you wrote about in your book. And there was also something in the book where you mentioned how you came back to it. Like maybe there was something um, that affected you, that drew you away from writing, but then you got drawn back in. And I know you've shared with me that you've always been a writer, but it sounds like at some point in your life you like closed down from that, but then came back to it. Um, I also would love to let our readers know there's another book Nanci has read that I haven't read yet, so I'm excited to read that. And then some more, I believe, coming in the future. Um, so it's kind of a lot in there to package up. And then maybe we can segue into um, the meditation and visualization, which may lead toward some of us doing some journaling later.
Yes, absolutely. So you're right. I have always been a writer in my heart. And especially like as a little kid, I loved journaling. I loved having diaries. And, there was something magical about putting, especially like pen or pencil to paper, that it just opened this like channel basically of information for me to be able to access. And again, if it's possible for me, it's possible for anyone, right? And so what happened though was that when I got pregnant with my miracle little girl that I talk about in the book, who's now 7, right? Then the last thing I was able to do was journal. And like, because I was just in so much physical discomfort, I was scared too. And for whatever reason, I just wouldn't allow myself to go there because I think I was afraid that if I would allow myself to really tap into the depth and the richness of journaling that I had done prior to being pregnant, that I might have an answer come to me about this pregnancy that was really unsettling. Like that maybe it wasn't actually going to work. Maybe one or both of us wasn't going to make it. And I go into more details in the book on that. But that there was just this part of me that was like, all I can do is my best to not panic and not fall apart the way it is. And so I'm just going to get through this. Like, as long as the baby's not saying no, I am not either. But there's a big difference in life between not saying no and actually saying yes, right? And there's a totally different energetic movement to that, and also just an essence and everything like that. So I would encourage anyone to think about that, again, with gentleness, not judgment. So if you're feeling indecisive about something, if you're like, well, I'm not going to say no to that, there's a big difference between not saying no and actually yes, and embracing and feeling that energy of yes. And so after I had survived this miraculous pregnancy, nearly died giving birth, which is a wholly other story as well, I remembered how much I loved writing and journaling. And so it felt to me like that, okay, maybe it's time to bring that back into my life. And I'd always wanted to be an author my whole life. And so I started journaling and just like really thinking about my thoughts. And that's when the idea came that, okay, all those other times that I've written a manuscript draft and I've thrown it away because it wasn't perfect, maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something about me telling my story. Because when I looked back on it, yes, it was a series of impossible things like Alice in Wonderland that I mentioned in the book, one of my favorite stories from childhood. But yes, it's also about that I was finally willing to not have to have everything be perfect and to surrender instead to a place that was bigger in my mind and in my heart, that came from kindness and really curiosity. So then that made me curious about that. And I was like, maybe I'll start writing about that. And so I worked on it for about 2 years and I wasn't getting a whole bunch of traction on that. But it gave me something to focus on when I wasn't busy being, mom to my little girl and everything else. And so I kept writing. And then there was one day that I heard my inner voice within me, because I'm highly intuitive, highly empathic. I have been my whole life. And that inner voice has been really my beacon and my guide through everything. And I heard her say that basically, why don't you meditate on this? Why don't you visualize this? And so I did. And so I did a meditation. And during the meditation, I had this really powerful visualization where I was shown a copy of my book. And there it was, cover to cover. And I could see the cover image on it. I could see the title of it that I'd already kind of been playing around with a little bit in coaching sessions, the title, but I saw it there written on the book. And I was like, whoa. And then I opened up the book in the visualization and I could see all these pages and there was like this gold light coming off of it. And then I heard that same inner voice tell me, it's already written. You just get to choose when you're ready and willing to remember it. And so that took all the pressure off of me from that point on. It was like, okay, this book is done. It's finished. I could see it finished in my hands. And so now I don't need to worry about it being done. I don't need to worry about when it gets finished or who's going to read it because I know it's done. And there was just this instant lift and comfort that brought to me. And then I was able to make decisions about who I was going to reach out to next, who I was going to ask at the time that I chose to ask to introduce me to my amazing editor, to who I was going to meet, who was going to help me with the cover design based on the image that I saw, right? So it's not that you lose your free will or your choices when you're aligning with that manifested, quote unquote, version of you. But it is that now you have that certainty and that calmness that can anchor you, even when life throws its whirlwinds at you, that you go back to that place of certainty and calmness from within. And that's how you navigate it.
All right, take us there.
All right. Nice segue, right? Okay. So if you're in a safe space to do so, of course, which I'm assuming everybody is, but if you're in a safe space to do so, what I want you to do is to really let yourself sit comfortably. Okay. So it's not just about focusing on our perfect posture from Pilates or anything else, but just sit comfortably and just become aware of your body and notice it, not with judgment, but just like you would if you saw a photograph of something kind of briefly and then it went away. And yet you could still see the image behind your eyes, even if they were shut. And that's going to gently invite you to let your eyes slowly close. And as they close, allow yourself to just breathe and take 3 or 4 deep breaths in and out. And whatever sort of pacing or rhythm or timing is working for you, go ahead and do so. And once you've let out that third cycle of inhales and exhales, I want you to ask yourself, how can I change the way that my breath is flowing right now? So if it was coming really calmly and slowly, maybe you can make it a little bit faster. If it was going a little bit faster, because maybe today you're a little bit anxious, you've got a bunch of things on your quote unquote to do or to da list, right? As my friend calls it, then maybe you can make your breath a little bit slower. Wherever you are, or if you're somewhere even in between, then you get to choose. Do you want to go faster or do you want to go slower? And again, there's no right or wrong here. There's just what is. And you're meeting yourself with that gentleness and that kindness rather than any sort of judgment. And as your breath is flowing now in this new way, take in for a moment the power that you have over how that breath is moving. And know that if you can be this powerful just by focusing your attention on something that normally you take for granted, that normally you don't even have to think about, hopefully, right? As long as you're alive, it's something you don't really need to focus on, that breath coming in and out until it's your final one. But right now, in this moment, really take in the celebration of what it feels like to have made a decision and feel the transformative result, even of something as simple as your breath and how it's moving. And now ask yourself, what could I take and how could I expand this experience of what I call gentle agency into one area of my life right now? One area that seems like no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I force it, no matter how many degrees I get after my name, no matter how many external validations I seek, I just don't seem to make any movement. Whatever that is, become aware of that without judgment or guilt. Think of it more like you're taking an inventory in your pantry, and that you're noticing as you go through each shelf, oh, I'm low on cereal. Oh, I need some crackers. Normally when we do that, we're not assigning blame or shame or judgment to ourselves. We're simply just making a list. And we're telling ourselves we're going to go to the grocery store, or we're going to order online from Instacart or something else. But we're not judging ourselves and being like, how could I let the cereal run down? How could I not have the, soup in the right cans and whatever it is. So ask yourself, what is that one thing? And whatever that is, see what it would feel like to have even 1% of movement in the direction that you would most want to experience around that one thing. And see if you can be shown a picture of what that could look like in your own life. Or if you're somebody that's more audio, what would it sound like? What would it feel like? Is there something you can touch to make it seem more real to you? Whatever it is, see if you can make a mental snapshot of yourself in this experience. And notice how can this experience be expanded upon by 1 more percent, and then 1 more percent, and allow your mind to take you on the journey into these new and evolving and expanded pictures or sounds or sights or touch of expanding upon this simple choice. And now, as you're sitting in this new moment of timelessness within time, who is it from your life, either past, present, or even future, that you would most want to invite to join you here in this expanded version of that one thing that you most hold hope around experiencing that shift, and see them there with you. Notice their response. Notice them celebrating with you. And recognize this feeling is available to you any instant you choose to recall it. It's yours. It's from you, and it is you, and it's within you. You can always access it at any point. And so right now, as you're in this experience, totally embraced with acceptance and celebration, ask yourself if there's one word that will allow you to re-enter this experience at any point in your life, and then listen. And whatever that phrase, you may hear, you may see the letters, you may feel them being drawn in the palm of your hand, or something entirely different. Make a mental snapshot once again, and hold this key as your access to this experience, and know that anytime you want, you can re-enter this experience with that key, and you'll be right in that moment of celebration and embrace. And from there, you can keep adding those 1% and another 1%. When you're ready and willing and believe you're fully worthy, you could go for 5% or 10%, but start with 1. And recognize the awesome power that you are within yourself, and that you are holding that space as the invitation for you and your highest version of you to share that lived memory as being right now. And allow yourself to once again become more aware of where you are and what your body is specifically doing. And begin to notice that breath once again. And let it flow with ease in and out, maintaining that memory of your key and of that feeling of those possibilities that are infinite and always available and accessible to you. anytime you choose. And slowly begin to take those breaths with a little bit more awareness and let them come in and out. And on that third cycle of exhale, once again, gently, ever so gently, invite your eyes to open and come back.
All right. So, yeah, pop on in. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just going to say during the meditation, it really felt like there was like a space, almost like a physical place inside that I could go. And it felt very tangible. And it was just, I don't know, very freeing to feel like, okay, I can step back into that space where I know, where I can kind of just gently, find that 1%, that next step. And so that was, yeah, it's a really cool experience. Like, and so my word that came was within. So I just like having this yeah, kind of like handle like, okay, I can go back within and find, okay, what's that next step? What's that 1% going to look like?
That is so beautiful. And I love that key for you too, within. Like, so what can be really fun with this exercise is you can either like draw a picture of a key, or you can, make one on Canva or something like that, or even like more artistic, like your beautiful picture behind you, something like that. Like, and it can be really fun to have your word written on that. And then anytime that life starts just to life on, right? And things are happening, you can just, oh, that's right. I have that key. I can go there anytime. And then you just like within, and then you're there. And it's like you can do this in so many other experiences in your life too. But what's really fun is when you start with that 1%, and I always do this with Pilates clients too, is that it's a 1% differentiation in the movement, right? When they're like, I don't have enough range or something like that. Okay, let's see, what would 1% look like? Or, oh, can you go back 1% if you're feeling pain? Are you still in pain? Okay, good. So now you know that if you're in a place that's uncomfortable, all you have to do is move that 1%. And oh, if you're still in pain, try another 1%, right? And you can just break that down for yourself, because sometimes having those increment milestones are much less frightening to ourselves on every level. So I love hearing that. And I love the within. That's beautiful.
Yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself down at the bottom. Just click on the little mic.
Um, I I was really touched by a lot of things that you said, because recently, very recently actually, a couple months ago, I started going to a counselor because I just wanted someone to talk to. And it's very interesting. I'm sure there's a whole lot of ways that counselors deal with things. I felt very free to share with her. And a lot of the things you were saying are things that I've been working on. This counselor, and it's kind of similar to one that I went to years ago. When I walk out, I realize that I am the one that figured out what I was going to do. She just kind of guided me, and I walk away with, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I kind of made a long list last time, but I said, I'm just going to start with this small thing. And she allows me to text her anytime. So I'll text her and say, well, this is working, and she might say, well, maybe you want to add the second one. It's very, very nice. The meditation and the breathing was very familiar to me, because I've had trouble sleeping, and I've actually figured out a thing where I close my eyes and I just do breathing and maybe 2 words, and sometimes the words change, but I can put myself to sleep, which I never was able to do before. And I actually did that before my counselor. my word when you were doing the meditation, and it's a very positive word, was talent. And I think it's because a lot of my thinking over many years has been very critical of my talent. And I have several, and I've really been working on using them and really believing in them. And one of the things is, you were talking about always wanting to journal. I always want to paint and express myself that way. Visual things are my joy. And I've just gone back into doing I go to an art group every other week, but then on the off weeks, I meet with one of my friends that's in the art group, and we paint together. And I've really challenged myself on, I'm going to do something a lot harder than I've done before. And I'm really going to let myself, if I don't like it, if it's not turning out, I'm not going to be critical. I'm just going to start again. And I finished one painting. I was very happy with it. I still am looking at it saying, who did that? Because I didn't think I was going to be able to. And now I have two more going, and I'm feeling like I'm succeeding, one with my friend and one at the art group I go to. And I going back to that place of, daring to make the mistakes. The talent's in there. Even if I blow it, I'm going to go back, and it's going to come out in another way. And anyway, I want to read your book. I haven't read it, but I'm hoping I can maybe borrow Sarah's copy.
Yeah, I have a copy for you. It's coming over your way.
Awesome. And I have a book club too. You didn't mention me as an inspiration to have a book club, so mine has been going for 20 years.
My inspiration for everything.
Oh yeah, I doubt that, but
she manifested me here. I wouldn't be here otherwise. With all of you. So thank you everyone who stepped in and shared. And like Nanci says, it's perfectly imperfect. We don't need to be perfect. The talent is there, and whatever comes out, whether it's ugly one moment and beautiful the next, right? It's that processing and that finding that joy in what we love to do in the process, versus trying to always have like the perfect outcome, being adventurous, right? And having that curiosity, that kind, soft curiosity within it. And actually, my mother gave me this beautiful sign that I have here in my Pilates studio, and it says something like, enjoy the chaos and the beautiful mess of your life. It's something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's exactly all of these things. So I'm sure that we'd love to all continue to explore more of this type of work with you, Nanci. So how can we get a little more access to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to paste here into the chat. And Sarah, I already sent this to you, but these are two different links where if you want to be on my email list, and if you also want to join my private Facebook community called Sparkle Circle, and that is available to you, and this is all totally free. You can also go down to the second link, which is my links page, and it has a link to my book. And then also there is the free gift that I was mentioning, which is called Align with Love Self-Healing Gift Set. And it is another guided meditation on inviting gentleness, as well as 7 days of self-healing journaling prompts that you can access. It can either be a complement to my book or an extension of the book, or it can be totally a standalone too. So you get to see, again, meeting yourself where you are, perfectly imperfect. And then there's also some links for other ways to work with me. So in addition to teaching Pilates privately and also in small duets as well, here in the Bay Area, where I am in San Francisco, a Bay Area, it's Northern California, you can find me at the Pilates studio that's called The Centered Body, that's in Pleasant Hill. So that's the live place that I teach sessions. You can also work with me virtually online for Pilates, as well as coaching. So within coaching, I have a special private coaching container that is called Share My Shine Now. And you can either do that in 3 or 6 month containers. And that is private one-on-one sessions with us, just like this over Zoom. And then I also, of course, give you things to work on in between. And we do guided meditations that are created for you, that are personalized for your specific things that you're wanting to transform and look at with kindness and curiosity. And then I also didn't get a chance to tell you about this, Sarah, yet, but I'm also launching a new program called Aligned on Every Level, which is specifically for Pilates professionals that are wanting to bring this idea of approaching being more, quote unquote, perfectly imperfect and kind and curious, not only with themselves as a teacher, but also with how they're approaching their clients and how they're approaching their clients' journeys and transformations. So I have different ways to work with me within that as well. If you look at the links, there's also all of my socials. You can come say hello to me on many different platforms, everything ranging from Twitter to Clubhouse to Facebook to Instagram and Threads. So I've got it all covered there. And if anything sparks your curiosity, please feel free to message me. And if you mention that you were here today, and if you are in the United States too, I am offering to send a signed copy of my book if you're wanting that at basically the price just it is online on Amazon, and I'll send that to you as well. So feel free to send me a message about that. And I think that's everything.
All right, thank you so much. And at the end of the book too, if you haven't read it yet, there are some journeys that you can take in here with Nanci as well. So there's a part 2, a 1-week mindset makeover, where there's journaling prompts in here, things to ruminate about. And then there's part 3, happily ever now, a 12-week self-healing journey. So I love the self-help realm. I love growth mindset work, and so it was just such a blessing to meet Nanci and to connect with her. And I even had her come and speak as a guest speaker at one of my Pilates graduations for College of San Mateo. So I'm sure that this is just going to continue to be a lifelong friendship, relationship, and I hope that you're able to glean something from being here today or watching this replay. And I look forward to connecting with you all in the Pilates World Book Club. We haven't chosen our next book yet, and so if you have any suggestions, you are more than welcome to drop those into our Facebook group and or on our new Instagram page. We don't have many followers there yet, so if you could go there and start following us and share that with anyone that you think would benefit from being part of this kind of collective and to connect with and share our ideas and passions together. I look forward to continuing to connect with like-minded folks. So thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next time.